He thought he was just kicking out some random woman in a hoodie. He didn't know he had just declared war on the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The air in the county courthouse hung thick and heavy, a stale cocktail of cheap floor wax, anxiety, and the faint, lingering scent of burnt coffee. I hated it. It was a smell that clung to the worst days of people's lives. I shifted on the hard wooden bench, my jeans feeling a little too tight, the hoodie I'd thrown on feeling a little too conspicuous. I was trying to be invisible, just another face in the crowd of worried families and defendants waiting for their names to be called. Today, I wasn't Special Agent in Charge Alana Vance of the FBI's Regional Field Office. Today, I was just Alana, here to offer a silent thumbs up to my cousin Marcus. He was a good kid who'd made a stupid, one-time mistake with a couple of friends, and I just wanted him to see a friendly face before he went in front of the judge. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A nervous habit, I pulled it out. It was a text from my deputy, a single line about a sensitive ongoing case. I scanned it, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, before remembering where I was. No phones. I immediately locked the screen and shoved it deep into my pocket, my eyes flicking up to the large, hand-painted signs on the wall. My training kicked in, automatically assess the room, clock the exits, identify potential threats. It was second nature, a program that was always running in the background of my mind. The courtroom doors were heavy oak. 2 bailiffs stood near the judge's entrance, looking bored. And then there was him. He was a courthouse deputy, not one of the bailiffs. Officer Miller, according to his name tag. He had the kind of build that came from gym time and a superiority complex. A thick neck that strained against his collar, a smug set to his jaw, and a way of walking a slow, deliberate prowl that told you he wasn't just here to keep the peace. He was here to remind everyone who was in charge. His eyes roamed over the benches, not with the watchful gaze of a protector, but with the predatory scan of someone looking for an easy target. He'd already hassled a young kid for having his backpack on the seat next to him, and made an elderly woman move to a different row for reasons I couldn't discern. His gaze swept past me once, then twice, and on the third pass, it locked on. I felt it like a physical touch. The sudden, intense focus. He'd seen me glance at my phone. A flicker of something triumph, opportunity, crossed his face. He changed his course, his heavy boots thudding against the linoleum with a new sense of purpose. He was coming right for me. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded in my lap. I braced myself. I dealt with men like him my entire life, my entire career. Men who saw my skin color and my gender before they ever saw me, and used it to draw a whole set of incorrect, demeaning conclusions. He stopped directly in front of me, planting his feet wide, forcing me to crane my neck to look up at him. He was intentionally crowding me, using his physical presence as an intimidation tactic. "See the signs?" he asked, his voice a low, condescending rumble that was somehow louder than a shout in the tense quiet of the hall. He didn't gesture to the signs. He didn't need to. His message was clear. "Yes, officer, I did," I said, my voice even and calm. "De-escalation 101. Don't give them an emotional reaction to feed on." I was putting my phone away. He smirked, a nasty little twist of his lips. "Looked to me like you were texting, maybe recording. You people love to do that, don't you?" You people. The words hung in the air between us, acrid and ugly. My internal temperature shot up 10 degrees. Years of training screamed at me to remain impassive, to analyze, to control the situation. But the part of me that was just Alana, the part of me that had endured 1,000 slights just like this, wanted to stand up and let him know exactly who he was talking to. I stamped it down. Not here. Not now. "I wasn't recording anything, officer," I said, my voice still steady, though it cost me. "I was simply putting my device away, as per the rules." "It's Officer Miller," he snapped, "and I'll decide what the rules are. Let me see the phone." This was the line. He had no probable cause, no reason to demand my personal property. It was a pure power play. "With all due respect, Officer Miller, you have no right to search my phone," I said, my tone hardening just a fraction. "I haven't broken any laws." His eyes narrowed into slits. My calm, factual refusal was not the response he wanted. He wanted fear, or he wanted a screaming match. He wanted a justification for what he was about to do. Attitude, huh? I knew it the second I saw you. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper meant only for me. "You think you're special? You think you can come in here and do whatever you want? This is my house. You follow my rules." "I am following the rules," I countered, refusing to break eye contact. "The posted rules. You are the one who is overstepping your authority." That was it. I had challenged him directly. His face flushed a deep, angry red. "That's it. You're done," he snarled, his voice rising to a volume that turned heads all across the hallway. People were staring now. I saw my cousin Marcus near the front of the line, his young face a mask of confusion and fear. "You're creating a disturbance," Miller boomed, projecting for his audience. "I want you out of this courthouse. Now." He reached down and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep with surprising force. A jolt of pure, cold fury shot through me. In my world, an unauthorized touch was an assault. My body tensed, every muscle fiber ready to react, to drop him to the floor before he could even blink. But I couldn't. I was just Alana. Invisible. "Take your hand off me," I said, my voice dangerously low. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Or what? You're going to file a complaint? Get in line." He started pulling me up from the bench, dragging me toward the exit. The humiliation was a physical wave, hot and nauseating. Everyone was watching as this uniformed bully manhandled me, a black woman in a hoodie, for the crime of sitting quietly. He was making an example of me. He shoved me forward, stumbling. "Get out, and don't come back." He pushed me through the heavy oak doors, the force of it sending me staggering onto the top step of the courthouse. The doors swung shut behind me with a final, definitive thump, the sound echoing the slam of a gavel. I stood there for a second, catching my breath on the cold, open-air plaza, my arm throbbing where he'd grabbed me. The shame was quickly being consumed by a rage so pure and so focused it felt like ice in my veins. He had no idea. He had no idea who I was, what I was capable of, or the catastrophic mistake he had just made. He thought he had kicked out some random woman with an attitude. He hadn't. He had just declared war on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I was about to bring the full weight of it down on his head. I stood on those steps for exactly 90 seconds. 90 seconds to let the adrenaline recede, to let the hot, blinding rage cool into something harder, something more useful. Cold fury. Strategic fury. The kind of anger that builds cases and ends careers. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully asserted his dominance over a nobody. In his small, sad world. That was probably the high point of his week. My first instinct was to call my own team, have a dozen agents in tactical gear swarm this place, and arrest him for assault on a federal officer. It would have been satisfying, a beautiful, cinematic moment of reckoning. But it would have been messy, and it would have made my cousin's minor infraction the epicenter of a media firestorm. No, this required a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. I walked calmly down the steps and around the side of the building, out of sight of the main entrance. I pulled out my phone again, the smooth, cool glass a stark contrast to the boiling anger still simmering deep within me. My thumb flew across the screen. I didn't look for my deputy's number. I didn't look for the U.S. attorney. I scrolled to a number I knew by heart, one I had used on more than one occasion for sensitive interagency matters. The main line for the chambers of the Honorable Judge Lawrence Thompson, the presiding judge for the entire county courthouse. A clerk answered, her voice polished and professional. "Judge Thompson's chambers." "This is Special Agent in Charge Alana Vance," I said, my voice low and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "I need to speak with the judge immediately. It is a matter of urgent courthouse security." There was a brief pause on the other end. The title, Special Agent in Charge, has a certain weight. It opens doors and bypasses gatekeepers. "One moment, ma'am." I wasn't on hold for more than 30 seconds before a new voice came on the line, deeper and more familiar. "Alana? This is Lawrence. What's going on? My clerk said it was urgent." Judge Thompson and I had worked together on a multi-agency task force targeting organized crime 2 years prior. We had a professional respect for one another. "Lawrence, I apologize for the unscheduled call," I said, keeping my tone perfectly level. "I am currently standing outside your courthouse because I was just physically assaulted and ejected from the building by one of your deputies, an Officer Miller." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the calculation of the sheer magnitude of the problem that had just landed on his desk. A county deputy assaulting the head of the regional FBI office on courthouse grounds during business hours. It was a jurisdictional nightmare and a public relations atom bomb. "Describe him," the judge said, his voice now tight with controlled anger. "White male, early 30s, stocky build, brown hair, approximately 6 feet tall. Badge number 482, I recited, from the perfect image burned into my memory. He grabbed my arm and forcibly shoved me out the main entrance. "Stay exactly where you are, Alana," Judge Thompson said, his voice like flint. "I'm sending my head bailiff down to you personally. Do not move." The line went dead. I leaned against the cold brick wall, took a deep breath, and let it out, slowly. Phase 1 was complete. I checked my watch. Less than 5 minutes had passed since Miller had laid his hands on me. In another 5, his world was going to start unraveling. A few moments later, a side door creaked open, and a man in a sergeant's uniform hurried out. He was older, with graying temples and a concerned, professional look on his face. This was Sergeant Davies, the head of court security. I'd seen him in briefings before. He saw me, and his pace quickened. "Agent Vance," he said, his voice hushed and full of alarm. "I'm so sorry. The judge just informed me. Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, Sergeant," I said, my voice clipped. "But your deputy has a serious problem." "Yes, ma'am," he said, his face grim. "The judge wants to see you in his chambers. Please, right this way. We'll use his private entrance." He gestured back toward the side door. I shook my head. "No." The sergeant looked confused. "Ma'am?" "We're going in the front door, Sergeant Davies," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "We're going to walk right past Officer Miller's post. I want him to see me." A flicker of understanding, and perhaps a little fear, crossed Davies' face. He knew this wasn't just about getting me to the judge's chambers anymore. This was about sending a message. He simply nodded. "As you wish, ma'am." He walked beside me, a silent, uniformed escort, as we rounded the corner and headed back toward the main entrance. I could see Miller through the glass doors. He was leaning against the wall, laughing with one of the other bailiffs, basking in the glow of his little victory. He looked proud of himself. As we approached the doors, his laughter died in his throat. His eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in confusion, as he saw me walking with Sergeant Davies. The smug satisfaction on his face melted away, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed uncertainty. We pushed through the doors. The hallway fell silent again, but this time it wasn't a tense silence. It was the pin-drop silence of an audience watching a predator get its first look at a hunter. Miller straightened up instinctively, his eyes darting between me and his boss. He didn't know what to think, but the primal fear of having made a terrible mistake was starting to dawn on him. Sergeant Davies didn't even look at me. He stopped directly in front of his subordinate, his expression like granite. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Officer Miller," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "Judge Thompson wants to see you in his chambers. Immediately." He paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the final, devastating blow. "And you will surrender your sidearm to me. Now." The color drained from Officer Miller's face. It was a fascinating physiological reaction to observe. The ruddy, confident flush of a bully was gone, replaced by the pallid gray of sheer panic. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked at Sergeant Davies, then at me, then back to Davies, his mind clearly struggling to process the command. Surrender his sidearm. Here, in the main hallway, in front of everyone he had just been lording his power over. It was more than a procedural step. It was a ritual of emasculation. Slowly, his hands shaking almost imperceptibly, he unclipped the holster's safety strap. The click echoed in the silent hall. He drew the weapon, holding it with 2 fingers by the grip, as if it were contaminated, and passed it to Sergeant Davies. Davies took it, gave it a quick professional check, and secured it in his own belt without a word. The entire exchange took less than 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The invisible armor of Miller's authority had been stripped from him, piece by piece. "This way," Davies said, his voice still a low monotone. He gestured with his head toward the restricted corridor that led to the judge's chambers. Miller gave me one last look, a wild, confused glare, like a cornered animal that doesn't understand the nature of the trap it's in, before turning and walking ahead of us. His confident prowl was gone, replaced by the shuffling, hesitant gait of a man on his way to the gallows. We walked down a long, carpeted hallway, lined with portraits of stern-looking former judges. The air here was different, quieter, cooler, smelling of old paper and leather-bound books. It was the smell of power, but a far older and more formidable power than Officer Miller's cheap brand of intimidation. Davies knocked once on a heavy mahogany door at the end of the hall, and a voice from within called, "Enter." Judge Thompson's chambers were exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a wide desk that looked like it had been carved from a single, ancient tree, and a large window overlooking the city square. The judge himself was standing by the window, his black robes draped over a nearby chair. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 60s, with a mane of white hair and eyes that had seen every lie and excuse humanity had to offer. He turned as we entered, and his gaze landed on Miller like a physical weight. "Close the door, Sergeant," he commanded. Davies did so, the lock clicking shut with a heavy finality. "Officer Miller, explain yourself." Miller, finding his voice at last, straightened up, trying to recapture some of his lost authority. It was a pathetic attempt. "Judge, there was a disturbance in the main hall. This woman," he gestured at me with a flick of his chin, still refusing to look at me directly, "was on her phone, in violation of the rules. She became belligerent and uncooperative when I confronted her. I felt it was necessary for the security of the court to remove her from the premises." He'd rehearsed it on the walk over. It was a boilerplate defense, the kind of justification he had probably used 100 times before. Judge Thompson listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When Miller finished, the judge didn't respond. Instead, he turned his piercing gaze to me. "Miss Vance, would you be so kind as to provide your account of the events?" I took a half step forward. I kept my voice calm, factual, the voice of a professional delivering a report. At approximately 10:40 a.m., I was seated on a bench in the main hallway, awaiting a family member's arraignment. I checked a work-related text message on my phone. Recognizing my error, I immediately locked the screen and placed the device in my pocket. At this point, I was approached by Officer Miller. He was immediately confrontational. He accused me of recording, and I quote, said, "You people love to do that, don't you?" I saw Miller flinch out of the corner of my eye. Judge Thompson's face hardened. "I informed him I was not recording," I continued. "He then demanded to search my phone. I declined, citing my right to privacy as he had no probable cause. He then accused me of having an attitude and told me this was his house and I would follow his rules." And a B. When I stated that I was following the posted rules and that he was the one overstepping his authority, he stated, and I quote again, "That's it, you're done." He then grabbed my right arm, forcibly pulled me to my feet, and physically pushed me out the main entrance of the courthouse. I finished my statement and stood in silence. I had laid out the facts. There was no emotion, no embellishment, just the cold, hard chain of events. Judge Thompson let the silence stretch out, his eyes boring into Miller. "Officer," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "do you have any idea who this woman is?" Miller's face was a mess of confusion and dawning dread. He shook his head slightly. "This is Alana Vance," the judge said, his voice rising with each word, a controlled crescendo of fury. "She is the special agent in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for this entire region. You did not eject a belligerent civilian from my courthouse, you moron. You assaulted a senior federal officer on government property. The blood didn't just drain from Miller's face this time. It seemed to vanish from his entire body. He looked like he might collapse. He swayed on his feet, his eyes wide with utter mind-shattering horror. He finally turned to me, his jaw working, a desperate, sputtering sound escaping his lips. I didn't know. I'm sorry, You're sorry you got caught," I said, my voice like ice. "You're sorry the woman in the hoodie you decided to harass and assault for sport turned out to be someone who could hold you accountable. You weren't sorry when you put your hands on me. You weren't sorry when you called me, you people. This isn't just an internal disciplinary matter anymore, Officer Miller," Judge Thompson boomed, stepping out from behind his desk. "This is a potential federal crime. Assaulting a federal officer. Civil rights violations. Your career in law enforcement is over. The only question now is whether you'll be spending the next few years wearing a prison uniform instead of that one." Miller looked like he was about to be sick. He opened his mouth to plead, to beg, to say anything that might stop the world from ending. But before he could, Judge Thompson held up a hand, silencing him. The judge walked over to his desk and picked up a thick manila file folder, a name written on the tab. Miller, Mark. He dropped it on the polished wood with a heavy thud. "You know, Mark," the judge said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone of profound disappointment. "Of all the people to assault in my courthouse, you chose the head of the FBI. I'm furious, but I can't say I'm entirely surprised." He flipped open the file. "This isn't the first time we've had to discuss your aggressive approach to interacting with the public, is it?" He ran a finger down the first page, his eyes scanning the text. "Let's see. A formal complaint from a Mr. Santiago in 2020 for unwarranted escalation and ethnic slurs. Another from a Ms. Chen in 2021 for improper search and intimidation. And here's one from just 6 months ago. A Reverend Johnson, who claimed you called him a thug for asking for directions. It seems, Officer Miller, that you don't just have a problem with you people. You have a problem with all kinds of people. The thud of that file hitting the desk was the sound of Miller's professional life ending. Each complaint the judge read aloud was another nail in his coffin. He stood there, mute and shrinking, as the documented history of his bigotry and abuse was laid bare in the quiet, august chamber. The smug bully from the hallway was gone, replaced by a pathetic, cornered man watching his life implode in real time. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, as if I held some magic key to undo it all. I gave him nothing. My face was a mask of cold, professional detachment. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford, not for a man who had built his career on intimidating the vulnerable. 3 formal complaints, Judge Thompson continued, his voice laced with a weary disgust. 3 opportunities to learn, to correct your behavior. 3 times my predecessor, and then myself, were assured by the sheriff's department that you had received additional sensitivity training and that the matter was handled internally. It appears, Sergeant Davies, he said, turning his sharp gaze on the head bailiff, that the internal handling was insufficient. Sergeant Davies, who had been standing ramrod straight by the door, flinched as if he'd been struck. Your Honor, I can assure you. You can assure me of nothing right now, Sergeant. The judge cut him off, his voice sharp as broken glass. Right now, your department looks incompetent at best and complicit at worst. A man with this kind of documented pattern should never have been in a position of public trust, let alone as an armed officer in a courthouse. He's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Well, congratulations, the wait is over. He closed the file with a decisive snap. Officer Miller, you are suspended without pay, effective immediately. Sergeant Davies will escort you to your locker to collect your personal effects, and then he will escort you off the premises. You are not to set foot in this courthouse again without a court order. Your final employment status will be determined by the sheriff and the county board, but I will be making my recommendation for immediate termination crystal clear. Miller finally broke. A choked sob escaped his throat. Please, Judge. My family. I have kids. Did you think about their family? I asked, my voice cutting through his pathetic plea. I pointed a single steady finger toward the door. Did you think about my cousin? The 18-year-old kid out there, scared out of his mind, whose only family support you just threw out of the building because you didn't like the color of her skin? Did you think about the families of Mr. Santiago, Ms. Chen, or Reverend Johnson? Every person you've ever bullied or belittled in that hallway has a family. You are the last person on earth who gets to use that as an excuse. The truth of it hit him. There was no way out. No excuse would work. He had flown too close to the sun, and his wax wings, built of racism and arrogance, had melted. Sergeant Davies stepped forward and placed a firm hand on Miller's shoulder. Let's go, Mark. The fight was gone. Miller nodded numbly and allowed himself to be led from the room, a broken man. The door clicked shut, leaving just the judge and me. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Judge Thompson walked back to his desk and sank into his large leather chair, letting out a long, slow sigh. He looked exhausted. Alana, I am profoundly sorry, he said, looking me directly in the eye. There is no excuse for what happened to you today. None. I appreciate that, Lawrence, I said. But your apology, while welcome, isn't the one that matters most. He nodded, understanding immediately. The public, he said grimly. All the people who have been on the receiving end of that man's conduct. Exactly, I affirmed. This isn't about me, not really. I have the power and the position to fight back. What happened today was just a symptom of a much deeper disease. Miller felt safe acting that way because he'd gotten away with it for years. How many people has he harassed who didn't know their rights, who were too scared to file a complaint, who filed one and saw nothing happen? He wasn't just a bad apple. He was a sign that the barrel is rotting. The judge steepled his fingers, his expression grave. You're right, of course. This needs more than just a firing. This needs a full-scale review. Procedures, training, complaint oversight, the whole 9 yards. That's a start, I said. But it's not enough. People need to see that the system works. They need to see that someone like Miller doesn't just get to quietly resign and get a job in the next county over. They need to see real, tangible consequences. My mind was already racing, piecing together a strategy. This was no longer just about one racist cop. It was an opportunity to force a change that was long overdue. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be interested in the civil rights implications, I began, ticking off points on my fingers. My office can open a formal investigation into the pattern and practice of the courthouse deputies. We can subpoena records, interview past complainants. Judge Thompson listened, his eyes widening slightly as he realized the scope of what I was proposing. This was no longer an internal courthouse matter. I was about to bring the full weight of the federal government down on the county sheriff's department. Alana, he said slowly, that would be explosive. Good, I replied without hesitation. Let's set off some fireworks. A thin, weary smile touched the judge's lips. I'll help in any way I can. You'll have my full cooperation. I know, I said. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. This time I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text from Marcus. They called my name. Going in now. Where are you? A fresh wave of anger washed over me. Miller hadn't just assaulted me. He'd made me miss the one thing I had come here to do. To be there for my family. Lawrence, I need a favor, I said, my voice hardening again. I need to get into courtroom 3. Now. Of course, he said, reaching for his phone. I'll call the bailiff and have him let you in through the side. I shook my head. No, I appreciate that. But just like before, I think it's important I go in the front door. And key. My mind was working, a new plan forming, one that was far more public and far more potent than a quiet internal review. It was time to stop being invisible. In fact, I said, a dangerous idea sparking in my mind. Can you do one better? Can you interrupt the proceedings in courtroom 3 for a moment? Tell the presiding judge you need to make an urgent announcement to the court. Judge Thompson's eyebrows shot up. Interrupt a live court session? Alana, that's highly unorthodox. So is assaulting an FBI agent in your hallway, I retorted, my tone leaving no room for argument. Trust me, Lawrence, this is necessary. The people in that room, the people Miller was terrorizing just an hour ago, need to see this. He studied my face for a long moment, saw the unshakable resolve in my eyes, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. All right, let's go set off some fireworks. He stood, retrieved his judicial robes, and slipped them on. The simple act transformed him. He was no longer just Lawrence Thompson, he was the Honorable Judge Thompson, the embodiment of the court's authority. He walked to his door and opened it. Follow me. We strode down the hallway, a strange procession of 2. The air of power that surrounded him was palpable. Clerks and lawyers who bustled past us flattened themselves against the walls, their expressions a mixture of reverence and curiosity. As we approached the double doors of courtroom 3, the courtroom where Marcus was facing his own judge, Judge Thompson held up a hand, stopping me just outside. Give me 30 seconds, he said, and then he pushed through the doors. I could hear the proceedings grind to a halt inside. The murmur of voices fell silent. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and waited. The 30 seconds felt like an hour. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a fierce, righteous anticipation. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. Then, the door swung open again, and a bailiff one I didn't recognize, thankfully beckoned me inside. I stepped through the doorway and the entire room turned to look at me. It was packed. Every bench was full of anxious faces, the same people who had witnessed my humiliation just an hour earlier. I saw them register who I was, the woman in the hoodie who got thrown out. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to shock. At the front of the court, Marcus stood beside his public defender, his shoulders slumped in defeat. When he saw me, his eyes went wide with a million questions. On the bench, the presiding judge looked utterly baffled, and beside him, at the podium, stood Judge Thompson, commanding the room. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, Judge Thompson announced, his voice booming with judicial authority. Please forgive this interruption. We have had a serious security incident in the courthouse this morning, and for the sake of transparency and public trust, I feel it is my duty to address it directly. A nervous ripple went through the crowd. I started walking, my footsteps unnervingly loud on the polished floor as I moved down the central aisle. All eyes were on me. I wasn't just Alana anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was the center of everyone's attention. Many of you, Judge Thompson continued, his eyes sweeping across the gallery, witnessed an interaction in the main hallway earlier between a courthouse deputy and a member of the public. An interaction that resulted in that citizen being forcibly and improperly removed from this building. I reached the front of the courtroom and stopped, standing a few feet behind my cousin, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then relaxed as he realized it was me. I gave his shoulder a firm squeeze. I'm here. It's okay. I want to inform you all that the deputy in question, Officer Mark Miller, has been suspended, disarmed and removed from the premises pending his termination. His actions were a disgrace to his uniform and a violation of the trust you place in us to maintain a safe and respectful environment for all who seek justice here. A collective gasp went through the room. Jaws literally dropped. People started whispering, turning to their neighbors. They had seen a bully win. Now they were being told in no uncertain terms that he had lost. Furthermore, the judge's voice cut through the noise. I want to state for the public record that the citizen he assaulted was not, as he may have assumed, some random person to be intimidated. She is, in fact, a decorated and high-ranking federal law enforcement officer. He turned and gestured directly to me. Allow me to introduce Special Agent in Charge Alana Vance, head of our regional FBI field office. If the room had been silent before, it was now a vacuum. The shock was absolute. I saw the recognition dawn on dozens of faces, the sudden recontextualizing of what they had seen. The powerless woman in the hoodie was now the most powerful person in the room. The public defender standing next to Marcus looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. I gave a slight, formal nod to the court. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to restore order, to show them what real authority looked like, quiet, controlled, and just. Agent Vance, Judge Thompson said, his tone formal, is here today not in her official capacity, but as a private citizen to support her family. The fact that she was denied that basic right is a stain on this institution, one that I promise you we will spend every waking moment scrubbing clean. A full-scale federal investigation into the conduct of our security staff, in partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office, will commence immediately. We will root out this poison. You have my word. He stepped back, his announcement complete. The presiding judge, looking stunned, cleared his throat and tried to regain control of his courtroom. Thank you, Judge Thompson. We will. Proceed. Case number 7322. The State versus Marcus Jones. The public defender, still looking at me with awe, shook himself back to the present. Your Honor, my client is here for a minor possession charge. He's a first-time offender, an honor student with a full scholarship to the state university. He made a foolish mistake. We asked the court for leniency, perhaps a diversion program. Before the prosecutor could object, I stepped forward. Your Honor, may I address the court? The judge, still off balance, just nodded. Go ahead, Agent Vance. I looked at Marcus, then at the judge. Your Honor, my cousin is a good kid. He knows he messed up, and he is ready to accept the consequences. His family is here for him. I am here for him. Whatever the court decides, he will not face it alone. But I would ask you to consider the boy he is, not just the mistake he made on one stupid night. My words hung in the air. The prosecutor, who had been ready to argue for a harsher sentence, seemed to think better of it. The judge looked from me to Marcus, his expression softening. He saw not just a defendant, but a young man with a family, with a future, with a powerful aunt who had just brought the entire courthouse to its knees to be there for him. He cleared his throat. Given the defendant's record and the unique circumstances of the day, I'm inclined to agree with the defense. Marcus Jones, you will be enrolled in the county's pretrial diversion program. Complete 40 hours of community service, stay clean for 6 months, and this charge will be expunged from your record. Do you understand? Tears of relief streamed down Marcus's face. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Court is adjourned, the judge said, banging his gavel. As the room erupted in noise, I wrapped my arm around Marcus's shoulders and hugged him tight. He was shaking. I'm so sorry, Auntie, he whispered. I saw what that cop did to you. Shh, I said, holding him close. It's over. He's gone. Let's go home. We walked out of the courtroom side by side, but this time the journey was different. No one looked away. No one dismissed me. Instead, the crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. I saw nods of respect. I saw smiles of gratitude from Mr. Santiago's son, from Ms. Chen's daughter. I saw a silent, thankful look from an old man in a church suit who I could only assume was Reverend Johnson. In that moment, I wasn't just Alana Vance, FBI chief. I was their champion. I had taken the power that man had tried to use against me, and I had given it back to them. The courthouse air still smelled of cheap floor wax and anxiety, but today, for the first time I could remember, it also smelled a little bit like justice.